The words hit me like a slap across the face, reverberating through the sterile hospital corridor where Dad lay connected to machines that beeped rhythmically, marking time until his inevitable end. "Marcus, I need to tell you something about the will," he wheezed, his once powerful voice reduced to a whisper. "Everything goes to Elena. The house, the business, the investments. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. All of it. Your sister is successful and responsible, unlike you. She doesn't need help, but she's proven she deserves it." I stood frozen beside his bed, my hands trembling as the full weight of his words sank in. 28 years of being the disappointment, the screw-up, the son who never quite measured up to golden child Elena. But this was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. "Dad, I know I made mistakes, but I've been clean for 3 years now. I have a steady job. I'm paying my debts." "Too little, too late, son." His eyes, once sharp as steel, now clouded with illness and something else. Disappointment that had crystallized into stone. Elena graduated summa cum laude, built her marketing firm from nothing, married well. You dropped out of college, got arrested for possession, lost 3 jobs in 2 years. I can't trust you with the family legacy. The machines beeped faster as his agitation grew. "She's visiting clients in Singapore this week, but she knows. We discussed it months ago. She'll take care of everything when I'm gone." That night, I sat in my cramped apartment, staring at the acceptance letter from the community college where I'd been planning to finish my degree. 3 years sober. 3 years of rebuilding. 3 years of hoping Dad might finally see that I'd changed. But Elena, perfect, successful Elena, had already won a game I didn't even know we were playing. The funeral was a blur of black suits and fake sympathy. Elena returned from Singapore just in time, playing the grieving daughter with Oscar-worthy precision. She hugged me tightly, her designer perfume overwhelming. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I know how much you loved him, despite everything. Despite everything." The phrase stuck in my throat like broken glass. A week later, we sat in the lawyer's office as Elena inherited everything. Dad's construction company, worth nearly $2 million, the family home where we'd grown up, his investment portfolio. I got his old toolbox and a brief formal letter about how he hoped I'd find my way eventually. "Marcus, I want you to know," Elena said as we stood outside the lawyer's office, "I don't intend to shut you out completely. Maybe we can work something out with the business. You could come work for me, prove yourself, work for her. The little sister I'd taught to ride a bike, who used to follow me around like a shadow when we were kids." The irony was suffocating. But I smiled and thanked her, because what else could I do? Over the next month, Elena settled into her new role as company owner with disturbing ease. She moved into Dad's house, began making improvements to the business structure, and started talking about modernizing operations. I tried calling her several times about that job opportunity she'd mentioned, but her assistant always said she was in meetings or traveling for business. It was purely by accident that I discovered the truth. I'd stopped by Meredith's coffee shop, where I'd been working as a manager since getting sober, when I overheard Elena talking to someone at a corner table. She was facing away from me, but her voice carried clearly. No, the construction company is perfect for laundering. Dad was so focused on keeping it family-owned and legitimate that he never bothered with proper digital oversight. All cash transactions, minimal electronic records. My marketing firm was getting too much attention from the IRS, but this... She laughed, and it was a sound I'd never heard from her before, cold and calculating. "This is exactly what I needed. My blood turned to ice as the pieces clicked together. Elena's successful marketing firm that Dad had been so proud of, her mysterious overseas clients, the way she'd been so interested in inheriting the construction company specifically, not just the money. I crept closer, my heart pounding. The old man never suspected a thing, she continued. All those years of him comparing Marcus to me, never realizing his precious successful daughter was running a money laundering operation through shell companies. And Marcus, God, he made it so easy. Every time he screwed up, it just reinforced Dad's belief that I was the responsible one. Her companion, a man I didn't recognize, chuckled. What about your brother now? Won't he be suspicious if you suddenly start changing how the business operates? Elena's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Marcus? Please. He's so desperate for my approval, so grateful for any scraps of attention, that he'd probably help me move the bodies if I asked nicely. Besides, who would believe the family junkie over the successful businesswoman? I've spent years building this reputation. I stumbled backward, my vision blurring with rage. Every family dinner where she'd been praised while I was lectured. Every time Dad had held her up as the example I should follow. Every knowing look between them when they thought I couldn't see. She hadn't just inherited everything. She'd manipulated Dad into giving it to her while she was using her business as a front for criminals. The betrayal cut deeper than Dad's rejection ever had. At least his disappointment was honest, even if it was wrong. But Elena, she'd watched me struggle, watched me fight to get clean, watched Dad slowly die while feeding him lies about how responsible and trustworthy she was. That night, I called in sick to work and spent hours on my computer, researching everything I could about financial fraud, money laundering, and the kind of evidence that would hold up in court. If Elena wanted to play games with the family legacy, I'd show her what the family disappointment was really capable of. The plan that formed over the next few days was simple in its elegance. Elena had made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was too damaged and desperate to ever be a threat. She thought she was the smart one, the strategic one. But she'd never had to learn how to survive the way I had. Being the family screw-up had taught me skills she'd never needed. How to be invisible, how to dig up information, how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. I started by applying for jobs at several companies that had worked with Dad's construction business over the years. My sobriety record and genuine knowledge of construction helped me land a position at Morrison & Associates, an accounting firm that had handled Dad's books for 15 years. Elena would eventually need to have the books reviewed as the new owner, and when she did, Phase 2 was infiltrating Elena's world more directly. I reached out to our cousin Jake, who worked in digital forensics for the FBI. We'd been close as kids, and he'd always been supportive during my recovery. A casual conversation about Elena's successful marketing business led to me mentioning some weird financial patterns I'd noticed while helping Dad with paperwork before he died, patterns that might interest someone in his line of work. Jake was intrigued. You know, Marcus, if you ever noticed anything specific, anything that might suggest financial irregularities, the Bureau has programs for whistleblowers, anonymous reporting, protection for family members who come forward about fraud. The seed was planted. Phase 3 was the most delicate, getting Elena to trust me enough to expose herself further. I swallowed my pride and called her office repeatedly until she finally took my call. Marcus, I'm so sorry I've been hard to reach. Things have been absolutely insane with taking over Dad's company. How are you holding up? I'm okay, I lied smoothly. Listen, Elena, I know I haven't exactly been the most reliable brother over the years, but I meant what I said at the funeral. I want to help however I can. Maybe I could come work for the company? I know construction. I know Dad's systems. There was a pause, and I could practically hear her weighing the pros and cons. You know what? That's actually not a bad idea. I could use someone I trust to help with the transition, someone who understands how Dad operated. When can you start? Hook, line, and sinker. Within 2 weeks, I was working in the construction company office, ostensibly helping Elena modernize Dad's record-keeping systems. What I was actually doing was documenting every irregular transaction, every cash payment that didn't match up with project costs, every invoice that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify. Elena, confident in her superiority and my supposed desperation, began treating me like a trusted lieutenant. She'd have me handle cash deposits that were far too large for the projects they were supposedly connected to. She'd ask me to create invoices for consulting fees that never corresponded to any actual work. She even had me coordinate meetings with clients who spoke in vague terms about cleaning up their financial situations. "You're really proving yourself, Marcus," she said one afternoon as I handed her a folder full of fabricated receipts. "Dad was wrong about you. You just needed the right opportunity." The words should have felt like vindication, but instead they felt like poison. She thought she was complimenting me by saying I was good at helping her commit crimes. The breaking point came 6 weeks after I'd started working for her. Elena called me into her office with an excited expression. "Marcus, I have a special project for you. There's going to be a large cash transaction next week, about $800,000. I need you to process it through the construction accounts as payment for the Riverside Development Project." I knew the Riverside project. It was a small residential job worth maybe $200,000 total. There was no legitimate way to justify an $800,000 payment. "Elena," I said carefully, "that's a lot of money for Riverside." "Are you sure?" She cut me off with a wave of her hand. "Don't worry about the details. Just process it like we discussed. This is big league stuff, Marcus. The kind of opportunity that could set us both up for life." That night, I made copies of every document I'd collected over the past month and a half. Bank statements, invoices, cash receipts, email correspondence, meeting notes, everything that painted a clear picture of Elena's operation. Then I called Jake. "I need to come in," I told him. "I have information about a money laundering scheme, and it's about to get a lot bigger." The next morning, instead of processing Elena's $800,000 transaction, I was sitting in a federal building downtown, walking Jake and 2 other agents through 6 weeks of documentation. They were very interested in Elena's operation and even more interested in the timing of the large transaction. "We've been tracking some of these shell companies for months," Jake explained. "Your sister's marketing firm was on our radar, but we didn't have enough to move. This construction company connection changes everything. The plan they developed was elegant. They'd let the $800,000 transaction proceed, but they'd be monitoring every step of it. Elena would be allowed to think everything was going smoothly while they built an airtight case against her entire network. My role was to continue working normally, continue documenting everything, and wear a wire during the transaction meeting." When Elena introduced me to her clients the following week, 3 men in expensive suits who spoke with subtle accents and never quite looked directly at anyone, I was recording every word. When she walked them through how the construction company would process their payments for tax purposes, I was recording that too. When one of them joked about how family businesses are so much more trustworthy than those corporate operations, and Elena laughed while agreeing, I captured every syllable. The raid happened on a Thursday morning. I was at my desk, pretending to review invoices, when federal agents swarmed through the office. Elena's scream of shock and rage echoed through the building as they placed her in handcuffs. "Marcus!" she shrieked as they led her past my desk. "Marcus, call our lawyer! This is a mistake! Tell them this is a mistake!" I looked up from my paperwork and met her eyes. For just a moment, I let her see the truth in my expression, that I knew exactly what she'd done, that I'd known for weeks, that every document she'd asked me to process had been copied and handed over to the FBI. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her face went white, then red, then white again. You, she whispered. You did this. Elena, I said quietly, standing up as the agents paused in the doorway. Dad always said you were successful and responsible, that you didn't need help. Turns out he was wrong about the responsible part. But don't worry, I'm helping you now. The same way you helped me all those years. The trial made regional news for 3 weeks. Elena's marketing firm had been laundering money for a network that stretched from Singapore to Miami, processing millions of dollars through fake consulting contracts and shell companies. The construction company had been the perfect final layer, legitimate, family-owned, trusted in the community. Elena was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Her co-conspirators got longer sentences, but she'd been cooperative enough during plea negotiations to avoid the worst charges. The judge noted that she'd exploited her family relationships and violated the trust of her deceased father to further her criminal enterprise. I was called as a witness during the trial, and Elena's lawyer tried to paint me as a jealous brother seeking revenge. He brought up my arrest record, my addiction history, my employment problems. Isn't it true, Mr. Chen, that you resented your sister's success? That you felt cheated out of your inheritance? I thought about that question for a long time before answering. Your Honor, I was angry about the inheritance. I felt like my father had given up on me, and that hurt. But what I discovered wasn't about money. It was about the truth. My sister built her reputation on lies, and she was using our father's business to commit crimes. That's not success. That's fraud. When it was all over, the federal seizure laws meant that most of Elena's assets were forfeited to the government. The house, the investment portfolio, even the construction company were sold to compensate her victims. The toolbox Dad had left me, worth maybe $500 in sentimental value, ended up being the only part of his estate that anyone in the family actually kept. 6 months after the trial, I was finishing my degree in business administration and working full-time as a financial analyst for Morrison and Associates. Jake helped me get the job, noting that my experience uncovering Elena's fraud had given me unusual insight into the kind of irregularities that honest businesses needed to watch for. I found myself thinking about Dad a lot during those months, about how proud he'd been of Elena, how disappointed he'd been in me, about the last conversation we'd had, when he'd praised her responsibility and dismissed my efforts to change. He'd been wrong about both of us, but not in the way I'd originally thought. Elena wasn't responsible. She was just better at hiding her crimes. I wasn't irresponsible. I'd just made my mistakes out in the open, where everyone could see them and judge them. The real tragedy wasn't that he'd divided his estate unfairly. It was that he'd died thinking his legacy was in good hands, never knowing that his successful daughter was planning to use everything he'd built as a tool for criminals. I visited his grave on the first anniversary of his death, bringing flowers and a copy of my college transcript. Straight A's for 3 consecutive semesters. I told him about Elena's sentencing, about the construction company being sold, about how I'd helped bring down a money laundering network that had stolen millions from honest people. I know you thought she was the good one, Dad, I said to his headstone. I know you thought I'd never amount to anything. But I figured out how to be the son you needed, even if it was too late for you to see it. As I walked back to my car, I thought about revenge and justice and the difference between the two. I'd started out wanting to hurt Elena the way she'd hurt me, to tear down the golden image she'd built while tearing down everyone around her. But somewhere along the way, it had become about something bigger, about protecting other people from her crimes, about honoring the legitimate legacy Dad had actually built before she'd twisted it into something corrupt. Elena had been right about one thing. I had learned skills during my years as the family disappointment. I'd learned how to survive, how to dig deep, how to keep going when everyone had written me off. I'd learned that sometimes being the underdog meant you were willing to do things that the Golden Children would never risk. But most importantly, I'd learned that real success isn't about fooling people into thinking you're something you're not. It's about becoming something you can be proud of, even when no one's watching, even when your father never lives to see it. Dad had said Elena was successful and responsible, that she didn't need help. He was wrong on both counts. But in trying to destroy the son he thought was beyond redemption, he'd accidentally created the very person who would save his real legacy from being completely corrupted. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't cost him everything he'd actually cared about. In the end, Elena got exactly what she deserved. 12 years to think about the choices she'd made, and the knowledge that the brother she'd looked down on her entire life had been the one to bring her down. As for me, I got something more valuable than any inheritance, the chance to prove that people can change, that second chances matter, and that sometimes the black sheep of the family turns out to be the only one with any real integrity. It wasn't the revenge I'd originally planned. It was better.